one of the kind of keystone face-to-face trips that we had was a neighborhood health assessment of the Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood, which really set the stage for the remainder of the course because it is all about, looking at health inequities at a local level and kind of expanding that circle, around the Bay Area. The thought of not kind of having that exposure for the students, I've just felt like it was going to just change the course dramatically. So I had some experience with Google Earth years ago, and it's got to be at least maybe 5 to 7 years since I've used Google Earth. So I thought I would just open it up and just see what it could do. And lo and behold, there's some very significant improvements in the way in which it's arranged and the ease at which one can actually make a tour. So one of the things I wanted to do was to replicate the experience as much as I could. So I figured using a tool like Google Earth, we could at least kind of quote unquote walk down some sidewalks and maybe look at some landmarks. But what I discovered is you can do kind of so much more. So within kind of this framework, I was able to quite easily pull in kind of places that are already kind of embedded within the framework of Google. And every time I kind of click on a particular area, I'm able to like add what Google has already kind of provided for me to my project really easily. I just hit the add project to my growing list on the left panel. And within this, as I kind of go to, quite literally the same exact locations that I would if we were face to face, I was able to, as best I could, kind of get to the locations that we would normally visit. And our first place being the Opera House in Bayview Hunters Point. And within that, I was able to provide some of the context for where we were. Also in this kind of, I think they call it a text box or a text window, and provide, some of the similar content that I would kind of describe to them. And I didn't necessarily read this verbatim, but I kind of just used this as my own kind of speaker notes, if you will, as we kind of talked about the significance of our location. And one of the things that the Bayview Opera House is used for, it's a meeting place for the community. We've had the luxury of actually being at this location when there were some community events that just happened to coincide with our neighborhood health assessment. And as I, kind of just started to put the individual locations that I would normally visit, there were, some advantages to actually doing it in this way. One of those advantages is, from any location, I can kind of like look back to kind of where we were and where we are going. So really from this point of view, I could have a view of like where we're going to be going a little bit later and kind of talk about where the locations are in relation to one another, which is a really important part of, why Carver Elementary School has some of the highest rates of asthma in the United States. And within each of these, I already mentioned that you can put the images, but you can also embed things like video, which apparently is on one of my other locations. So within any of these locations, you can embed YouTube videos work the best. But here's an example of an embedded YouTube video, which kind of pops out really nicely. So that's not a video that I created. What I would use for this tour during the health assessment that we would do in person is I actually have a number of podcasts that we would listen to at specific locations to both break up the student presentations that I have them do, and then certainly kind of break up my voice from this. And what I had to do for those was, I found the easiest way was to actually take those podcasts and turn them into YouTube videos, because then I can embed it really easily kind of within here. So this is actually not necessarily a podcast.
Well, a lot of people are benefiting from the building boom in San Francisco.
But this was actually a news broadcast that I actually took the audio out a few years ago, because I just wanted the audio piece to be part of my kind of like podcast walking tour. But then within this context, I actually put the video back in because it was a little bit easier. But there are, just so you can kind of see what I made, if I can find it. Okay, here it is. Yeah. So here's one that I actually had just a podcast for, and I turned this into just a really simple video. I just found some still images and we want this place down now. So I was able to, give a little bit of life to, kind of the podcast portion of the tour that I have them do. And then as I was making my way through these different locations, as you can see, I have a lot of locations on here, I'd also break up this tour with points that students would present what they prepared ahead of time. Again, as a way to kind of break up, us just kind of looking at this tour, me talking, but they are also kind of experts in some of the community health needs for both the Bayview Hunters Point and then San Francisco at large. So from my perspective, I just wanted to create a tour where everybody's voice was heard. And the, kind of the benefit of doing this, at least this year, is that I think that this would enhance my regular face-to-face tour, because this could be a resource that we either use before or after our tour, just to either relive the experience or look at some more specific examples, because obviously there are some significant benefits from looking at it from a bird's eye view, as opposed to kind of being on the ground where you can't see the relation of everything to where you're actually standing. Here's another example of, a great, we don't actually see this much of the shipyard. So again, one of the other real advantages of doing it in this way is that, we can see a whole lot more that we just would not be able to see based on the restrictions in this particular area. So looking at the shipyard in this way was definitely actually a significant improvement. So yeah, we did open it back up again. We really just used it as a kind of a springboard to talk about the experiences that we had during that time. But certainly, I think the possibilities really kind of open themselves up to being able to revisit it throughout the year if we wanted to, which is, obviously I have the Bayview Hunters Point. So some of the other things I like to touch upon throughout the course are some other areas. And, the students are generally pretty surprised, of the fact that we do have this environmental injustice happening here in Bayview Hunters Point. They are even more surprised when they realize this is not unique to this little area. All we have to do is make our way over to West Oakland. There are plenty of locations in Alameda. There are plenty of locations down in Silicon Valley even that are also Superfund sites that, don't get a whole lot of press because there's not as much controversy. So I can see kind of building this piece out to really have locations all around the Bay Area, because this is very, San Francisco centric, and obviously we have students from all around the Bay, and they may or may not realize how close they are to a particular hazardous site. And I think this visualization is definitely eye-opening if I put it on the map for them. And I do a activity where they are looking at a particular location up and down the coast of California, and I do have them look at a map. I mean, it is easy enough for me either for me to pre-mark it on this map, or for having them kind of present their presentation within this context as well. Because what you can also do is to have, I'm pretty certain that you can have embedded slides. So obviously this works really well with any Google document. So if they created a Google presentation, we easily could have students give their presentation within Google Earth. So if I added kind of actually I can just edit a place mark that I have. Let's go, I'll just try over here. I can have them add, whatever kind of Google thing it is to this window here that will then come up as my pop-up. So it could be anything from my drive, which could be Google Slides or an image that they created within there. So it makes it really easy to, if you're already a Google Drive person, this is a great marriage, and it makes it really seamless.